On this episode of Eat Sleep Drive, I just got back from a track day with my Lotus and I was using these Powerstop track day pads. Stay tuned because I'm going to give you my full review of these pads today on Eat Sleep Drive. Welcome everyone to another episode of Eat Sleep Drive. As I mentioned in the intro, I just got back from a track day with my car, actually Grid Life. I had an absolute blast. Check out my previous two videos where I fully covered those events and my experience there. I was able to place second in my class, which was super awesome. Not as good as first, obviously, but I had a great time, met some really good people. Now, to the task at hand, are these brake pads any good? That's what we're gonna answer today. These Powerstop track day pads, this is the first time I'd ever used them on track. I've had experience with Carbotechs and Hawks, other race pads, but this is the first time I had ever used these pads. So today I'm going to give you my review of these pads specifically. Now, we're going to start it off with how they performed on the track, because obviously I think that's most important for a track day pad. But later on, I do want to talk about how they are on the streets, because some people want to run the same pads on the streets and to the track, they don't want to swap them. So I will be giving my review of both the track and the street driving of these pads. Additionally, I'm going to be taking off the pads that I had on there that had about 8 15-minute sessions on them. And I'm going to be showing you how much they wore, so you can get an idea of how long they'll last, what their longevity is, and whatnot. So we'll be diving into that later as well. But first, let's start with my review of these pads on the track. So how did these pads do on the track? Well, in one word, great. They performed fantastic. I never had any problems with them whatsoever, and I was able to have a lot of confidence in my braking system, which is obviously super important on the track, and especially if you want to put down fast times, you need to be confident in your brakes. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is bite, or initial bite on these pads. It's really good. They do take some heat in them to work, as you would expect from a track pad, but I was able to modulate them easily. I wasn't locking up the tires, getting ABS straight away. The friction material seemed to work out really well, and I think they have great feel. Now, a lot of brake feel has to do with your fluid choice, your choice in your brake lines and whatnot, but certainly the pad does have some feel or feedback to it as well. And it held the car down really well. The back straight at Mid-Ohio, getting up well over 100 miles an hour, probably closer to 120, 130 at least, and having to haul down the car going into Madness, which is a pretty slow turn. It was able to do that no problem, lap after lap after lap. Like I said, 15 to 20 minute sessions. I don't have experience with these on longer sessions than that. Maybe most importantly, other than obviously the braking power of the pads, is brake fade. Did they fade at all? And the question is no, not at all the whole weekend. Once again, 15, 20 minute sessions. This is a light car, granted, but there was no fade whatsoever. They were super consistent, and that's about all I could ask for, is consistency in stopping power in a pad, because that's what gives you the most confidence going forward, being able to brake late or trail brake into a turn, which these cars love to do, so you can rotate it around a corner. Now, how was wear on these pads? A little bit later we're going to dive into, and I'm going to actually take off the pads, compare them to a new pad, and show you how much they wore over these two track days. But the one thing I wanted to talk about before then is rotors. Now, I've had experience with other pads in the past where I've cracked rotors from excessive heat and stuff. I'm just using standard rotors on this car, factory rotors, and we'll dive into a little more later, but I had no cracking problems whatsoever, and they wore great. Like I didn't measure them beforehand, but anecdotally, just looking at them, hasn't caused any excessive wear on my rotors, which I think is really nice, especially for a track pad, which can tend to be kind of harsh on your standard rotors. So the one downside I will say to these pads, and this, I hate to almost even mention it as a downside because you'll get this with a lot of track pads, but if I just run my finger along here, you can see these dust a lot, and that's pretty common for, like I said, pretty much any track pad. That's something you need to keep in mind, especially if you plan to run these on the street. You're gonna be cleaning these 24/7. So it's at least worth mentioning. Like I said, a lot of pads do it, but I am gonna mention it as a downside. So before we take this car on the street and I do my street review of these pads, let's see how they wore. I'm gonna jack the car up, we'll remove the wheels, we'll pull the pads out, and I'm gonna give you a direct comparison. I have brand new pads and I have these pads. I'm gonna show you how much thickness is left on these pads and how much life you should expect out of them. So let's jack this up and do that now. Okay, here is a brand new pad, and I'll show you the thickness here. Now I'm gonna pull out the pad that I used for the track day, and we can compare the thickness differences here. So let me just kind of put them right next to each other. Now Lotuses are known for doing this. This pad, you can kind of see it's like worn on an angle. Lotuses are known for doing that, so that's something a little bit specific to this application. I wouldn't necessarily call that a problem with the pad, but you can definitely see, obviously we got some wear out of the pad. Let me get my caliper and I'll give you the actual measurement. Okay, here is the thickness on these pads. Let's see, we got 13.77 roughly millimeters. So that's on the new pads. Now I'm gonna grab the old pads here, do the same measurement. Obviously we're gonna have less here. You can see that's 12.19. So let's see, 1.5 millimeter roughly. And yeah, that's pretty even on both sides. Let me do it on this side. 12.34. So that one's a little bit thicker on that side. Like I said, Lotuses are known to taper the pad, but so you know, we lost 1.5 millimeters. There's still obviously plenty of pad left here. So overall, I would say that's pretty good. So Powerstop track day pads on the street. It is a cold day. You can see I had to put my jacket on out here because it's like 45, 50 degrees outside. But you know, obviously the pads are cold. It's a cold day. You know, I'm just doing regular street driving. It takes extra stopping distance, like huge rocket science there, right? They're not terrible. It doesn't take long for them to have a decent amount of stopping power. Would I recommend these for daily driving? No, I don't think I would recommend any, you know, track-oriented pads for daily driving, but I would say that I would have no problem driving these to and from the track. You know, sometimes with my previous car, my 240, those pads were so extreme that I wouldn't drive them to the track. I would swap pads. I would drive street pads to the track, swap to track pads while I was there, and then swap back. That gets a little bit annoying, not a huge deal if your calipers are well designed, but these I would certainly say you could get away with driving to and from the track. The biggest thing though with these pads that I'm pleasantly surprised about is the fact that they're quiet. So I'm gonna stop here. They don't make any noise. A lot of track pads, especially the most aggressive ones, have a lot of squeal to them, certainly, especially when they're cold on the street. They squeal like crazy coming to a stop. My 240 did that, and it was really annoying. But these pads are super quiet, so I would say they're kind of streetable in that regard. They just don't make any noise, and I'm pleasantly surprised about that. The dusting is there, as I already mentioned, but overall, you could definitely get away with with driving these on the street. Certainly, especially to and from the track, that wouldn't be a problem. I'll put it to you this way. While I maybe wouldn't recommend driving track pads on the street, I don't plan to take these off and run the stock pads. I'll just run these on the street. So we've talked about track driving, we've talked about street driving, we've talked about wear. So where does this all come in? Would I buy these again? Now, full disclaimer, Powerstop provided these to me for free, but I am under no obligation to review this in any other way other than my complete honest opinion. They're not paying me in any way. They just provided the pads to try. So I'm just gonna give my honest review. So would I buy them again? That is the first question. Yes, I absolutely would buy them again for this application. And what I mean by that is if you're doing a track day where you're doing like 20, 25-minute sessions maybe, I would absolutely buy these. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't use these for other applications like some more serious racing, but I just personally haven't had a chance to try them yet, so I can't endorse them for prolonged track sessions. I don't know how they'll deal with like really long, high temperature, long levels of abuse. But I can say, clearly the pads performed well. I was able to place second in my class. So they're very good at what they're called, track day pads. The main selling point to me is obviously the value. Now these pads, certainly it's gonna vary application to application, but for my Lotus, they were almost half price compared to some of those other name brand track pads. So that's huge value. Now, for someone who's on a budget that wants to do a track day, that's obviously super appealing. And if they're gonna perform very similar, if not the same to those pads, then why would you not go with them? So I would absolutely buy these pads again. Well guys, I hope you found this review helpful. I know a lot of people that watch this channel do track days and are into tracking their car. If you haven't already heard about these, check them out online. See how much they are compared to other track pads and see if it makes sense for you. For me, I think the cost versus what you get out of them is certainly worth it. It's a good value in my opinion, and I definitely plan to run these in the future. I appreciate you guys watching as always. Feel free to check out my other videos of this car, specifically the grid life coverage. I'll have those on the end screen. But until then, we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching Eat, Sleep, Drive.